Joining me now is Avi Hyman, a spokesperson for the Israeli government. Thank you so much, Mr. Hyman, for joining us here on the program. It's quite an extraordinary move, a significant one, that the United States has felt that it needs to build this seaport within the next few weeks. But the question is, why was this even necessary?
Thank you very much for having me on. I'll tell you categorically that there are no limits on the amount of aid that can go into Gaza. I'll say that again. There's no limit on the amount of aid that can go into Gaza. Now, what we've said to our allies and friends around the world is, if you bring it, we will ship it in. The problem isn't getting aid into Gaza. It's the distribution of aid once it's in Gaza. And that's a problem as
Mr. Hyman, that's not what the United States is saying. That's not what your staunchest of allies is saying. They're saying more needs to be done, that Israel ultimately is the occupying power on the ground. And it's up to you to ensure that people don't starve.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying, is that we are working on improving the distribution, because until now that was run by the UN agency UNRWA, which is a front for Hamas, which was using Hamas to protect them, quote, protect them. We know that Hamas was stealing that aid. We know that.
So here on this program, just yesterday, I had Jan Egeland, the Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council, who was just in Gaza, and he talked about the number of trucks banked up as a result of Israeli vetting, going through absolutely everything, which of course is your prerogative, and no one is saying that you should compromise your security. Certainly your allies are not saying that, but every single one of your staunchest allies are saying that our patience is wearing thin. And the fact that tonight the United States has had to announce this is really quite extraordinary, that they don't buy the narrative that you are selling, that it's up to the UN and they haven't done a good enough job.
This week, a record amount of trucks went through, 277 trucks in one day. We're doing our utmost to get the supplies in, but like I said, Hamas is doing their utmost to steal them, just like Hamas is embedded within and underneath their population.
But the standards that the world holds the Israeli government should surely be different to the standards we hold Hamas to. As you say, they are a group that launch all sorts of attacks, and yet just last week we saw over 100 Palestinians killed as a result of gunshot wounds because of aid truck entering the area, and utter chaos. This is not what the world expects from the IDF. It's not what the world expects from the Israeli government.
I can't confirm those numbers, and I can't confirm what you just said. What I can tell you is, yes, there is a humanitarian crisis of sorts in Gaza, because Hamas launched a war against us, coming over our borders, beheading, raping as a weapon, burning entire families alive. We have to defend ourselves. This is an existential war. We are fighting for our very existence. Hamas has made it clear.
No one's questioning that, sir, but under your watch, 16 babies should not die of starvation. One just 47 days old, who died just a couple of weeks ago.
War is absolute hell. And I feel for the civilians that have got caught up in this war on both sides. Civilians shouldn't have to die as war, but we didn't choose this war. We didn't want this war. Hamas launched this war on us. And
we didn't choose this war, but there are responsibilities that a state like Israel needs to adhere to.
And we are doing our absolute utmost to get as much aid in, to change the distribution. We're working now with the private sector. We're working with our allies around the world. You've seen the airdrops. You've reported these reports about the Americans bringing in aid by sea as well.
And you'll ensure that the Americans have said they don't want troops, any boots on the ground. So they will be relying on Israel, the occupying power in Gaza, to ensure that hundreds of people don't die trying to get access to flour.
Well, let's make it clear. Israel is in control of all of the aid that's going in, all of the airdrops, everything going in. And we will continue. And we'll continue every day. We're getting better at distribution. But Hamas is trying to steal that aid. They have actively stolen that aid. No one is going hungry if they're a Hamas fighter. Those people are underground while their people are suffering. Their leaders are living at large in Qatar and making statements about our hostages, the 134 hostages, men, women, children, babies being held, a crime against humanity. They're speaking about them from Qatar. They're speaking about them from Istanbul and posh hotels while their people are suffering. The finger needs to point to Hamas. Hamas could put their hands in the air and surrender tomorrow and give back those 134 Israelis. And the reality would be very, very different in Gaza. But that's not what Hamas wants. Hamas wants their people to suffer so that they put pressure on the international community.
Mr. Hyman, ultimately, I have to go back to what your staunchest of allies are saying, and they're saying you're not doing enough. Ultimately, that is the reality. They are saying that Israel needs to do more. Whatever you may say about the UN or Hamas, today, there are 30,000 people who have died as a result of this war. There are babies starving. There are children on the brink of famine. The UN and various other agencies, you can say all you want that that's not happening, but that is what your staunchest of allies are saying today.
Those are Hamas figures, I can tell you categorically.
The US president is using it. So is the US president lying?
We have killed over 12,000 terrorists, mainly Hamas fighters. Also,
and 18,000 civilians.
No, those are Hamas figures that cannot be.
The US president, we heard, Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, just last week say 25,000 women and children have died in this conflict.
I believe, I could stand corrected, please fact check me, but I'm pretty sure those statements will walk back. These numbers cannot be confirmed. What I can tell you is Hamas is doing their utmost to get civilians caught up in the war, because that's how they will stay in power.
You will point the finger of blame at Hamas, and that's fair enough. And as I said, your allies have said you need to defend yourself. That is not the question here. But when civilians are being starved as a result of Israel's failure, that is where the problem lies. And the fact that the Americans have had to create a seaport today because they want to bypass Israel, but having to also rely on Israel, it is significant and extraordinary.
We welcome our allies' support in getting more aid to the people that need it, not to the Hamas fighters. We will work with our allies. But
no one wants the food to go to Hamas, not your allies, not you, but they do want it to go to starving babies.
Right. I'm seeing pictures of starving babies from the civil war in Syria. The year is 2024. Gaza is not in Syria. I've seen that posted by senior Palestinian officials. I've seen terminally ill children dying in Gaza. Terminally ill children sadly die around the world. I've seen Gazans receiving aid from American airdrops and throwing it
38,000. We know the population of Gaza. There's over 2 million people living there. So the fact that the Americans have had to use the most difficult means to enter Gaza and deliver aid, this is the most ineffective way, when in fact they should be able to work with the Israelis. If you don't trust the UN, if you don't trust any other body, including the Egyptians, surely you have faith in the Americans so that they can use one of your border crossings, the Erez border crossing, for example. Why isn't that open?
The Erez border crossing was the main crossing used by Hamas. They destroyed much of it when they came through butchering our people. The Kerem Shalom crossing is being used. The Nitzana crossing is being used to check at an incredible rate. We've got record amounts of aid that went through this week. We've got the airdrops. Now you're talking about the new American plan that could potentially become a reality soon. We are doing our utmost. What could you imagine Britain dropping aid into Germany in late 1940s?
This is often used as an example whenever I speak to Israeli officials. But the truth is that your allies today expect better from you. And they are criticizing the way in which that aid is being received and distributed. Ultimately, you are the occupying power. We will have to leave it there. But I'm grateful for your time, Mr. Hyman.
Thank you very much.